Everybody's got their caffeine and their hydration. All right, we'll call the meeting back to order at 11:09. So we are now on item 8.5. 8.5, this is on page 253. This is the 2024-2034 long-term plan project development and group activity structure. We have Haven Walsh joining us. Were there any comments you wanted to start? You happy? All right, we'll just go straight to Haven. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So yes, my name is Haven Walsh and I'm the Corporate Planning Manager. So essentially, as outlined, the purpose of this report is just to provide you an overview of the long-term plan, how we're looking to pull it together, and then cover off how the information will be monitored and reported to you and come to you for your decision making. The last part of the report is seeking your approval to the group of activity structure, and that's one of the first things that we always pull together when we review our long-term plan. So I'll just step through the report at quite a high level and then open up for any clarifying questions or comments. So I know that most of you will be familiar with the long-term plan through previous trainings or also through your induction process, where I understand you had a good overview of the corporate planning cycle, how LTPs are pulled together, what they're for. But just a brief reminder, they're our 10-year plan. They map out everything we're going to do and how much it's going to cost for 10 years. So they'll set the rates for the 24-25 year. And then when we do the next two annual plans after that, that will be the benchmark that they're both compared back to. Yeah, and I guess essentially when we're trying to pull the long-term plan together, it's how we bring to life the strategic direction, which I understand was set just this morning. Cool. So the next bit of the report covers off a bit about the deliverables or the components that will be brought to you for your decision making and information along the way. And then also how the project is structured. And we're not actually looking to change too much about how that was all done from last time. And then I guess, yeah, the last bit of the report is covering off that group of activities section. So it's outlined there. Probably the best way to see it is in paragraph 19, where it steps through some of the changes. There's not much that's significant. There's just a few name changes to try and describe a better what those activities are doing. The group of activities mirrors our organizational structure quite closely. So what is called a group of activity is pretty closely aligned with what you might have also been called a directorate. There's the two slightly bigger changes in there are just moving what used to be called land management and advisory services from the integrated catchment management group of activities over to the resource use group of activities and renaming it primary sector engagement. And the other one is splitting out planning, reporting and funding into two new activities. So planning and reporting is the stuff that our team do, our team and the finance team. And then the funding is a slightly different, it has a different aspect. So we're just seeking to make that into two distinct activities. So that's probably, is it okay? It's okay if I leave it there and just open up for any questions and comments?
Yes.
Look, I just, having been privy to the previous long-term plan, which Janine kindly shared with me, there's an awful lot of detail and a lot of work that goes into this. And I'd just like to float a couple of suggestions to councillors. I would like to see us have a look at a reset, start from a zero base and build the business back up. And I suggest that probably needs to be given as a directive, if there's any support for that directive to staff at this point, because otherwise they'll be working on the long-term plan and the anticipation that they're going to be building on what we've already got. And I would like to see a full bottom-up review. That's the first point. And I support that by some discussions which I've had with some people in Robbie's catchment, where they want to take back responsibility for some of their activities that take place in their catchments. And that's going to have a significant impact on the structure. Now, been shared the people and budgets for the catchment. There's going to be some stranded costs if this happens. And I would have thought that needed to be factored into the long-term plans. If in fact it's possible to make changes and move responsibility from council for management of these projects back into the catchment. So I just wonder, I don't want to have this discussion in 12 months' time and find that we can't do it. I think it's important we have that discussion before then. So I'm just putting that on the table now and asking when is the right time for those points to be discussed by council.
Just, so, so this is just, so Councillor Hughes is just asking for some guidance on when we can make our wishes known in terms of how budgets are developed. Yeah.
2 points. First one should have been asked.
Sorry,
Back the other way
I'm
around.
sorry, just hang on a second because you don't have a light. So just speaking order, I've got Councillor Clarkson, Councillor Hodge, and Councillor Strange. Just if I can get you to keep the red light on down there at all times, that way you don't lose it. Oh, and Stu and there's somebody else that I missed. Anyways, go ahead. So response?
Yeah, so there is a timeline built into that with discussion on things like the levels of service review and the financial strategy. And I think that's where we start covering off things about rating impacts and how much of a financial envelope we're working within. I don't know if Janine, you've got anything else to add to that.
Yes, so through you, Madam Chair, as Haven said, one of the key tenets of the long-term plan process is to review our levels of service. So what are the services that we provide and to what level? I guess the process that we use to do that is probably a little bit different to what Councillor Hughes is asking for consideration of, which is really starting from what is the level of service that we currently provide and where from there in response to your strategy, staff believe that there's an opportunity to do more, do less, do different, potentially transfer functions, whatever it may be. But it is anchored on the starting point of what we currently do. I think the significance of that is for many of those activities, we have been out and consulted with the community around those levels of service. So that just needs to be acknowledged. So the process sort of feeds that conversation, but probably it doesn't start from a blank piece of paper to rebuild the organisation. It's really going, where do we currently sit and where do those things need to change in response to particularly council strategy or other things in the external environment. That should, though, draw out those areas that you've also referenced, Councillor Hughes, around the do different is looking at, are there activities that communities actually want to take back so that there is a different service delivery model and for us to consider what that actually means from an organisational impact as well.
So if I understand correctly, when we set levels of service, we do that in consultation with the targeted ratepayers that receive that service, right?
Yeah.
And so if we are to change a level of service, we have to go back and consult again.
Correct.
So so the reason you start with the current level of service is because to change that, either improving or downgrading, will trigger a consultation process, assuming that it's significant, right?
Yeah.
It's material. So that's my understanding of that. So just want to make sure that we're clear on why we start with our current levels of service, because that's what has already been negotiated. And to start from zero assumes a different outcome to those negotiations, right? Yeah. Okay.
And look, if I could just add, I think if we were to start from zero every 3 years, it'd be pretty hard to run an organisation because we've still got a lot of work to do in the meantime. I get I think I understand, and I just want to check I understand that right. I get the intent to be able to have a scrutiny over what we do and where we spend our money, as opposed to where you requesting that maybe there needs to be a discussion in the process somewhere where there's a zero start about what we do and how we do it.
Sorry, I'm gonna, so my speaking order after Chris, I've got Bruce, Katarina, Angela, Stu, Noel, and then Mike. So did you want to further clarify for me, Chris, your?
I guess my concern is, I would like to understand what we're doing outside the work that we're mandated to do. Because it seems that we get involved in a whole lot of peripheral areas, and I'm not going to try and identify any of them. And we haven't had, I don't believe we've had the debate. We've got a strategic plan, sure, and it's an overarching plan, but it doesn't come down into the detail, which actually gives us some input into what's this really costing us? Is it necessary in this day and age, given that we're really under cost pressures? We know we've got huge, massive inflation in the country. Everybody's hurting. What can we do as a council to pull that back and make it more palatable to our constituents? And from my perspective, the easiest way I've ever found that to be achieved is by starting from scratch and saying, why are we doing that? Can we stop doing that? Is there a better way of doing it? Is there a more efficient way of doing it? So that's the discussion that I'd like to have.
Great, thank you for that, Councillor Hughes. And what we were discussing before about levels of service, that is only a portion of what we do, right? That's sort of in that, I don't know, I'll go to you, Janine.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. So I guess when we talk our levels of service review, that does look across every activity that the council undertakes. Part of that will be looking at, for each of those levels of service, what is the legislative driver for it? Is it mandated? Is there some discretion in it? And what's the cost associated with providing that level of service? So I think the process that we run through is aimed to answer the questions that Councillor Hughes is rightly asking. I guess it just it comes from the perspective of we are an organisation with, as Chris has said, an existing program of work, and where are the change levers that we can, be working in developing what the future direction of the organisation and our expenditure and programs looks like, that we can't just turn off some of those taps immediately. But I think we try and look at levels of service from all of those angles, and bring that back through to you to go, which of the changes do you support staff doing further work on?
Okay, so when you're communicating us, you'll clearly spell out what is mandatory for us to deliver and what's discretionary. You'll also spell out what is a result of a consulted level of service, so that we're very clear where a change in something would trigger significant levels of engagement or something like that, right? So I think we're clear on what we're asking for in terms of how you step us as councillors through the process, and also the level of rigor we're asking for. All right, I'm going to go to Councillor Clarkson, and then I'll come to you, Councillor Hodge, after that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just interested in alignment of this list of group of activities with our other structures, if you like, our other approach. So I'm interested in the alignment with our committee structure, with our strategy document, and with our state of environment reporting. And so really my questions are around that looking at it from that high level view and thinking about alignment. So in terms of the topic group of activities under the heading Integrated Catchment Management, I'm trying to understand why catchment management and planning is placed there, and then below it directly as a separate grouping, flood protection and control works. I mean, it seems to me if we have a committee which is integrated catchment management, just trying to understand how catchment management and planning flows across into that other category, basically. And another point relating to that I'd like to make is I can see in the group of activities relating to science policy and information, a commentary around environmental monitoring, environmental science and information. I'm wondering where Mātauranga fits in that. And because, you know, if you're going to talk environmental science, then the question is, what do you mean by environmental science? So I'd like some comment on those two matters. Thank you.
I guess in terms of the distinction between the different groups of activity, integrated catchment management, flood protection and control works, flood protection is determined as significant, so it has to be separated from the other mandatory, and it needs to be kept distinct from the other areas. Notwithstanding, there is obviously a crossover between many of these areas, but I guess that's one comment on there. I'm not really, sure.
So Mataranga is definitely built in terms of that environmental monitoring program. I think probably if we go back 9 years, there was a specific business case in terms of how we incorporate that into our science program. So that will be in the detail underneath each of these.
Yeah, well, I accept the second point, but I need to make further comment on my first observation. So catchment management and planning is if it's truly going to work and be integrated, it needs to be in both those sections, is the point I'm making. How do you ensure that the flood protection, river management, land drainage and control works are truly integrated with a catchment management approach? Just taking your list on face value, I know that, you know, there are dangers in taking it on face value, but I'm just trying to get a sense of how it really does fit together, and I guess the mutual interactions that occur between different groups of activities and stuff like that.
Yeah, look, and I'll just invite Greg to probably,
Sorry, can I just clarify in terms of the report? So this is a reporting structure, as Haven said. The mandatory element of it is the Local Government Act identifies particular activities that councils are required to report on separately with some mandatory measures, so that there's some benchmarking and consistency that can be undertaken across the sector, which is why we have to call that out. Operationally, it is an integrated catchment management approach that Greg can speak to.
Sorry, Katarina, can I get you to turn your mic off just so I can bring Greg in?
Yeah, just in response, I think Janine actually picked that well. So operationally, we do run an integrated catchment management program across both of those groups of activities. That is the fundamental to the integrated catchment management directorate. So the integrated catchment management group of activities is not the same as the work that is undertaken by the integrated catchment management directorate.
Yeah, so I think I've had my answer. Classification doesn't determine structure and alignment,
No.
but it's still important because it's like a lens that you're passing over the issue, and then the question is, are you really doing what you're intending to do?
yes, and of course to monitor that we have a committee structure which does overview it.
The other thing I point out is that we have zone plans across the region, and they are integrated across all of those activities.
Councillor Hodge? Mike?
So my question was about the summary number 3, but I was just going through the powers of the TOR, or Stratton Pole, and once upon a time I would have believed that this probably would be right, that with regular project updates to provide through Stratton Pole, but Strategy and Pole is no longer the whole council like it used to be. So I wondered whether or not that's relevant in itself, even though the terms of reference of Strategy and Pole says we're just about more of a law than this damn council is. So I'm questioning that. What I'm questioning is project updates to be provided through strategy and policy, when it should always come to us now that strategy and policy is not a full council.
So if I understand correctly, these are just updates. It's not decisions, right? So it would be like when we have project updates that come through risk and assurance, that it's just, this is how we're progressing. And so there's a subset of council that ensures we are indeed progressing. it's not giving direction to the LTP.
That's correct. All of the decisions or direction giving in terms of where the LTP is heading will be achieved through council workshops and council meetings. So there would be no decision making by the Strategy and Policy Committee. It really is providing an elected member project governance layer in essence. So you can understand where we're at with the program of work and what's coming up next in terms of those activities, but not making the key decisions that will come back to this whole table.
Angela.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, thanks for the report. Think most of my questions were similar to Councillor Hodges. Yeah, just whether that was the right committee for it to go through. I just had a further question. Paragraph 21 is a bit ambiguous. You say, however, 2 key changes are recommended, but I can see no 2 key changes. Is
So
that just a typo or?
Yeah, maybe it's not clearly outlined. If you refer back to the table on paragraph 19, I can just step you out what those changes are. It's the movement of land management advisory services from the integrated catchment management group of activity into the resource use group of activity and renaming it primary industry engagement. And the other key change that's referring to is the splitting out of planning, funding, planning, reporting and funding, which is in the customer, community and services group of activity, into those 2 new names highlighted blue, planning and reporting and community support. So that's what that last paragraph is referring to.
Cool, thank you for the clarification.
Yeah, if it had said are recommended as noted in paragraph 18, that would just help us circle back to the right place. That would be great. All right, now I've got Councillor Kneebone.
Thanks. Just in response to Chris's suggestion, look, I'm not supportive of, I forget the terminology used, but going back to base 1 to decide what we should be doing and what we shouldn't be doing. As Chris said, I think this is an enormous organisation. I guess, Chris, with respect, it concerns me that from your commentary, you appear to have spent a little bit of time with Robbie and some of the ICM stuff and decided that that's quite sacred and quite justified, yet you seem to think there's a whole bunch of other stuff we do that can be done away with, and I think you're going down a really dangerous road. I think you're underestimating how much time and resource would be required to do that. If I've understood your proposal properly, and I acknowledge I may not have, and I think, we've got a whole bunch of work programs that interact with the work programs of a whole bunch of our stakeholders as well. And I'm just thinking of some of the LTP consultations we used to do of old an annual plan when we used to produce much bigger documents before we were allowed to make them a bit more concise. And it wasn't uncommon to sit here for a week in bloody LTP hearings, and we used to go to Thames and sit there for 2 days because there were so many claims that come to Thames. And if I've understood what you're proposing, I can see us sitting around this table for a blimmin' month consulting with the community, because believe you me, they'll come back and point out all the things all the ramifications of what we're proposing to cut. And I guess the other point I'd make is that, what's legislated, what do we have to do versus what's feel-good stuff. And I'd use the analogy, I was trying to think of one, and maybe it's not a very good one, of what constitutes a family that brings up their child really well versus one that doesn't. The world's your oyster in terms of how many blimmin' sports events you want your kid to go to versus it. And just because you don't take your kid to 10 different sports events in a month doesn't mean you're not looking after them properly, And there is a whole bunch of, hey, should we be doing this? Should we be not? But to try and make that decision in the next 12 months and go back to square one, I think it's just it's bigger than Ben Hur, and I don't think we'd get very far. Sure, if we want to identify some key areas that you're concerned about that we can focus on for the next, as an LTP that I've forgotten, or an annual plan, then hey, by all means, let's do it and have a discussion about what it should be. But to go back to square one with the whole business, I just think it's not realistic.
Councillor Smith?
Thank you. And possibly suffering Stu's wrath for the second time this morning. I want to pick up on what Chris introduced earlier, and I've got some comments written in here. One, legislative direction equals certain costs. Two, level of service, targeted ratepayers. I think for me, and I really want to understand the timeframes here within this document. Earlier this week, Greg produced a document in the ICM workshop, which was our people and budgets. It showed there that there's 160 staff within the ICM area or the directorate, of which for flood protection and land drainage, there's 3.6 people leaders. There's one people leader to 3.6 staff. In catchment and river management, there's one leader to 3.3 staff. In biosecurity and biodiversity, there's one leader to 5 staff. In resilient development and emergency management, there's one people leader to 4 staff. Exceptionally high ratios, and therefore, as a former chair of a drainage committee, member of river committees, the issue for us 3.5 years ago was the costs within this organisation as to the administration of those districts compared to delivery. And when you look at the budgets, I don't want to dwell on them because it's getting down into detail, but these are the sort of things that I really do have an interest in. And my question is, we've had approaches for going back to self-managing districts. I want to know that the time frame within this document to do that external consultation on level of service is sufficient to do the workload properly, because as I think Chris did mention, or somebody has, that we get to a certain point in time, and I'm used to that after the last 15 years, we can't go and relook at that because we have run out of time. You know, for me, the time starts now, but are we going to allow sufficient time to speak to our targeted ratepayers? Because I'm discounting the legislative compliance that we have to do as an organisation. That's a done deal. But where there's discretionary income and taxing of our ratepayers, we need time to understand and consult with it. Meaningful consultation, just like we did with the Muggeridges. We went out and talked and we listened and we heard. If we don't do that, we will carry on doing the same old stuff. And I can't explain this cost structure. Very superficial look at it right now in integrated catchment. And Greg's probably cringing over there. I'm sorry to pick on this, Greg, but it's just one of those things from within that area of flood protection and land drainage that has come up previously, and it's still an unanswered question. How can this organisation justify the costs? And we need to have that meaningful discussion. So I'd like to know when we're actually going to be doing the consultation with those targeted landowners. Thank you.
So, I think it's really good to raise these things today, because we're giving a really good steer to the ELT and the chief executive as to the areas that we want to drill down into with significant level of detail, and your request for assurance that we allow for sufficient time to engage with these communities is noted, right? So I've got Councillor Downard, Councillor Cookson, and then I'll come back to you, Councillor Hughes. So Councillor Downard.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just agree with Councillor Hugh. I think, you know, as a new time councillor, and especially just going through the annual plan, what I thought was, you know, coming through the long-term plan, the 1.6 and the baseline, then ended up without all the niceties that we all want to do, was 5.2, and we ended up with 6.8. So is the baseline you know, from the long-term plan, business as usual, the 1.6 going to the 5.2. So I look forward to a workshop that we all are on a even playing ground, that we do know the process on where we're starting and where we're going.
Yeah. And just to clarify, it was 5.8 is where we're at. All right, Councillor Cookson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd just like to say that I agree, Chris. I agree with Chris Hughes, Councillor Hughes, Councillor Dharma, and Noel, Councillor Smith, on all those discussions. I was actually elected on exactly that we were going to go back and look at the burden rate of where it lays and if it's fair or not. And that was how I got elected here. So in this, in the next 12 months, we need to dive deep into that place and see if the costs that we are being charged are appropriate for the level of service we're getting. And I call that burden rate, or that's what I've been told in the past. It's a burden rate cost. So I look forward to those discussions. Thank you.
Councillor Hughes.
Just following on from Councillor Smith's comments, my scrutiny is not just limited to catchment. I would also like to look at other sectors of the business, one being transport. It's our single biggest cost centre. I know, had a meeting with Mark, which was very good, and he's explained the dynamics of what's going on. But I'm interested in the costs and efficiencies. We've got an outsourced operation. How many people does it take to run that? We don't have anything to do with the ownership of vehicles, running of those. So there's a lot of things that I'd like to spend some time on and understand what the costs are and what we're delivering for it. I see buses running everywhere with nobody on them. That's costing our ratepayers. So leave it there.
Okay.
Can I just
Thank you.
reassure Councillor Hughes that I'm not a single issue? That was just one that I had an
Yeah,
example of.
Yeah, great. And I think that I am sure that what staff are picking up on is that this council is very focused on effectiveness and efficiency and ensuring that there is adequate return for where we put our resources, because they are not our resources, they are our ratepayers' resources. So I'm sure you are all getting the message loud and clear that we want that level of detail, that we recognize that there are new councillors around this table that will be going through the LTP process for the first time. It is a complex, long, drawn out, process. It is, and we want to make sure that we're taking everybody through that in a way that allows them to feel confident in their understanding, so that they are confident in their decision making. All right.
Can I just make a comment
Oh,
on
yes.
this? Thanks, Madam Chair. And I think, yes, we hear it loud and clear. In terms of, sufficient time to go into detail and sufficient time for consultation, it's probably just to remind ourselves, basically by the end of this year, we'll have to have a pretty firm idea what it is that we're going to be wanting to go out and consult on. It's going to come around really fast. And at the same time that the rest of our business goes, we're not stopping the rest of our business just so we can do this. And so Janine, or Haven, sorry, you just might like to give that reassurance to council. What is that opportunity so they have sufficient time to go into detail and be confident in what they're going to go out and consult with early next year?
So yeah, we do have a series of deliverables mapped out in there, and throughout those there will be quite a lot of workshops to get your direction on those as we go through the process. And then, as Chris said, we do need to nail down what the big issues and matters are that we put into the formal consultation that does start next year. So I guess just at a high level, you will see regular updates and workshops over the coming months up until the end of the year when we get the draft budget pulled together. It's a big detailed project to sort of list out every one would take some time, but it starts with the levels of service workshops, flows into the revenue and financial policy, the financial strategy, and then we pull together that draft budget at the end of the year.
Right, we've got that work stream outlined in paragraph 16. So brace yourselves in June. what I'm saying. For, and while that, we've got that foundations, that draft non-financial forecasting assumptions workshop being a strategy and policy committee, it is a workshop, so I'm going to, all council are welcome to attend and participate in that. Well, at the discretion of the chair of that, but, yeah, I encourage you, given the questions that we've got coming out today in this discussion, let's make sure we're all participating in that. All right,
I'm
so
sorry,
I've
Madam
got
Chair.
Jennifer, and then I've got,
No,
I'm gonna go to Stu Kneebone after that, because you've had a couple cracks there, Stu,
but-
or Noel, so I'm gonna go to, sorry? Yeah, I'm gonna go to Jen,
Go.
and then I'm going to you, and then I'm going to Noel.
yeah, just wanted to respond as well since we were asked for opinion. I recall coming in new and having the exact same desire as what I think Councillor Hughes has expressed. It was for different reasons. It was more for how do we transform to deliver good service socially and environmentally, rather than what I'm hearing, the more austerity type reason. But I want to give some confidence, including to Councillor Cookson, over those many workshops. You do get a chance to really go into where all of the rates kind of fall, and whether that be how the charges and fees are done, all that stuff, and so there's that opportunity to ask those things, and that's probably why people say it takes that first term to really learn the whole thing, and then it's a lot easier to be even more effective in, say, subsequent terms, because it does require that. And on the idea of a reset, having come from last triennium and having seen our new CEO come in and having seen the restructure that happened then, and now seeing the reform storm, as I still call it, and how busy our staff are, I don't think now would be the time for that kind of review. But I think that with the future for local government and the Through Waters changes and other things that are happening, there will naturally be an evolving and a really deep scrutiny into what each council does. And so I think that would be the right time to ask even more of those questions, in case that's helpful. Yeah, no, I appreciate the desire.
Great. All right, Councillor Kneebone.
Oh, thanks. Look, my question is one of clarification, and it's not about giving you my wrath or whatever you want to call it, but you've been in this game for a long time. You appreciate how much work's involved if we're to go down the path that I think Chris is suggesting. I'm curious as to how you see that panning out, because I just don't think we've physically got the time or the resource in this organisation to do this sort of back to basics, start from bloody scratch that Chris is suggesting. I just can't see how it's going to happen. And so therefore, what's the process going to be to try and decide where we're going to target our efforts? I mean, I heard Chris talk about public transport. Well, there's a whole bunch of stakeholders intertwined in our public transport programs. Where the hell are we going to start? Because I can tell you right now that I just can't see how it's going to happen. Unless I've misunderstood what Chris is saying, but and what you're saying.
And what we, so just bringing it back to the clarification we had earlier, that as we go through this process, staff are going to make it very clear. This bit is mandated by regulation. This bit is not. This bit has been consulted in terms of levels of service and involved external parties. This bit has not. And give us some real clear guidance as we step through, so we can see the areas where we can go into into greater depth without necessarily triggering a huge amount of public consultation, et cetera, right? So I'm just, that's what we've all agreed, right? Yep. Happy? Okay, I'm gonna go to you, Noel.
Thank you. And yes, I'm on board with that, Madam Chair. Stu, you might have misinterpreted, and that's fine. I don't necessarily support the whole, throw out the baby and the bathwater together. But there are some aspects of the long-term plan and levels of service that we certainly need to address. My concern is, and calling on that experience of my previous life, the reality is if council internalises this without the quality consultation that's needed, and I'll pick on integrated catchment again, going out, if we did it internally and from reports from staff and our own ideas, and then go out for consultation and seek feedback, you generally run out of options and time to do anything meaningful other than do the same old, same old. My experience has shown that by going out early and engaging in asking people directly what their aspirations are, rather than sending out a consultation document, actually meeting with people. And I think we saw the benefit of that with Mugridge's, of you actually front up, invite them, they turn up, and you get that meaningful feedback, which you can then integrate into the discussions and formulating that consultation document.
Yep.
It too often is,
And
councils
we've-
develop it, send it out,
and
and
we-
waits for the masses to come, and it's too late.
And we've sent the very clear message about ensuring that we have appropriate levels of time or time frame built into this so that we can do just that.
So, Madam Chair, I think in terms of the process, that opportunity will crystallise end of June, just before you head into your council recess. That is when we'll come back to you with the levels of service process and the areas for potential change. Now, that will be the opportunity for council to go, yep, support or don't. And then what is the engagement
that
that we
triggers.
can actually do, working alongside progressing those options and opportunities.
Great.
So I, for one, would like to be involved in those workshops or public consultation events, as I think a lot of us would be.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And we'll
But
work
that'll
through
be
that.
when you're back from
We'll work
your
through
July
that.
break.
All right. I do want to wrap this up because we are just receiving this report. Councillor Marr.
That's where I was heading to actually. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, certainly encourage, as Chair of Stratton Poll, to everyone be involved, and that's a no-brainer. And in the interest of progressing it, I'd like to move that this report be accepted.
Great. Do we have a
Received.
seconder? Councillor Downard. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. All right. Thank you very much, Haven. Really appreciate the presentation. All right, we now move on to 8.6, item 8.6. This is on page, sorry, what am I at? 258, page 258. So we've got Director Ryan with us again. So this is, and just so we're all clear, we are just receiving this report. Just so we focus in on our process here. Over to you, Greg.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And yeah, quite a timely report, particularly having just discussed Mugridge's and the kind of complex challenges that we are dealing with in the flood protection and land drainage space. Those challenges are only increasing in terms of the changing environment that we needed to deal with, in terms of looking at sustainable land use practice, because infrastructure is a long-term investment by council and effectively by our ratepayers. So it's important that we're making some good decisions now in terms of moving forward. One particular area, I guess, of absence that has been identified over the past years is, and this is by council as well, is the participation of government in supporting our communities to be resilient and support our flood protection infrastructure. With the costs rising, it is becoming an increased burden on our ratepayers, and there's a high awareness of this right across the sector. What this paper does is introduce to you to Edu Kahika, and in particular the River Managers Special Interest Group, which is my counterparts across the country, and the work that we are doing to bring the government to the table in terms of acknowledging the national benefits of our flood protection infrastructure and the need or case for government co-investment. The work that this, I guess, focus has supported initially was our Shovel Ready program. When Shovel Ready came about, the sector was in a perfect position to jump in through that open door, put some projects forward, and secure a significant amount of funding for the region to offset the costs to ratepayers. We now have a second opportunity that we have identified as part of a move to promote longer term and sustained investment by government in this particular area of work that we do. in lieu of sustaining that sustained investment, we've put forward a second tranche of funding, which, as you can appreciate, over the last couple of months, it's probably come to the top of the table for a lot of folk around the government table. So the purpose of this report is to raise your awareness of this work that we are doing. It is about supporting our existing work program and projects that are already identified through our long-term plan process. It is about making sure that additional funding is there to help offset those increasing costs that our community is facing. You'll also note that we have picked up a lot of learnings from our previous shovel-ready program in terms it does take a lot of effort to receive, expend and report on government funding. And so we've made sure that we've been quite conservative around the costs involved in these projects going forward, not only with regard to program and project management, but also acknowledging the impact of inflation and the fact that this is a 3-year program. Madam Chair, I'm happy to leave it there as it is, just for information and awareness, and I'll be sure to give Council an update as things progress.
Great, thank you for that. Councillor Clarkson.
Yeah, so through the chair, Greg, thanks for your report, and this I think is relevant to our field trip yesterday. So I'm going to make a couple of connections to the field trip. I'm interested in knowing whether the funding, the co-funding that's being applied for, because it does highlight climate resilience, the extent to which nature-based solutions to climate resilience can be built into the proposal for funding. So, for example, yesterday we saw Pipiroa and the estuarine scenario with the birds and all the rest. And I'm wondering to what extent in these proposals, you know, I've noticed the fish passage pumps in the last 2 items of the appendix, but to what extent has the lens of nature-based solution been passed over all the proposals so that it's not just focused on infrastructure and engineering, that at every opportunity we build in some nature-based solution to improve climate resilience? So, you know, reading the list there, it's hard to tell with most of the titles there whether in fact that lens has been applied as well, or whether they are just entirely infrastructure and engineering projects. And I guess at the same time also understanding that on our field trip when we stood by the pump station at Orchard Road, the thing that struck me significantly about that was, yes, it will help protect the tuna, but the pump station was a focal point for major biosecurity issues. It was surrounded on all sides by grey willow, woolly nightshade, pampas, gorse, all sorts of stuff. And so the question is, again, you know, when that infrastructure is put in place, what are we doing about the other issues that it promotes? Because, you know, any form of disturbance on a landscape causes the style of disturbance which actually enhances further issues relating to biosecurity. So I'm just interested in your analysis of that appendix in terms of that lens of nature-based solution and whether in fact that's been built into a greater number of projects than I can detect by just reading the titles.
Yeah, thank you for your question, Councillor Clarkson. Yeah, it does vary across those projects, and you will note that some of them are very sort of engineering scheme focused in terms of some more straightforward upgrades. But a couple of projects I would highlight for you are the first 2, which are around supporting our catchment and river program in our catchments that benefit from our schemes. And so those are about looking beyond infrastructure and actually working towards much more healthy catchment that flow down into those streams. So and that's across both the Waikato-Waipa West Coast areas and the Coromandel River catchments. The other ones I'll point out there is some of our work that we do on the Hauraki Plains to entrap sediment that comes through the river through natural processes, and then collect that sediment on a regular basis to utilise that for our infrastructural work, having some cost benefit to council, but also helping to remove sediment from that particular system. I think it was in the order of 14 kilometres worth of silt traps that we have on the Hauraki Plains, and so certainly looking beyond a simple engineering solution, how we can work with the environment that's occurring there. And look, I mean, I think, and making a general comment, is the whole focus of our directorate is about integrated catchment management and looking at opportunities when we do our infrastructure projects to achieve as many benefits as we can for the community. And I think that's the challenge for each of those projects as they progress through their different stages, to make sure that we are looking at those opportunities.
Yeah, look, that's really helpful. Just a quick follow-up. So when you make the application for the funding, does the prescription for that funder recognise the importance of nature-based solutions, or are you constrained in any way by the nature of the funder you're making the proposal to?
No, and what I may look to do, so we have a large business case document that underpins this work that's been prepared, and that does talk more broadly about the fact that engineering has certainly moved on in the past decades. It's not just about building concrete things and controlling the environment that we work in, but it's more about working with that environment.
Thank you.
Great. Councillor Cookson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As a Piaka ratepayer, the only thing I welcome this these projects, and if the government will fund them, that's great. The only thing is, I think there's not enough Piaka River scheme in here, because as I said, we're the poor cousin and we always get treated that way. And it's just no disrespect to Greg, I've already spoken about this, but some of our renewal of our assets haven't fitted in this zone. So it's unfortunate that we couldn't have done more upgrading on the Piaka River. And just feels like that we're once again been subsidising the rest of the catchment, and we left. I'm not saying that's true, but that's the feeling that I feel. So yeah, and I hope that in the next round, the Piaka River gets a lot more funding towards replacing some fresh-friendly pumps and some floodgates that may need to be replaced in the future. Thank you.
Councillor Dunbar-Smith.
Yeah, just to say that one of the things that came up with the Muggeridge's talk with the community is that they were interested in us finding out about how central government, why their decision making, but it would be useful to let Felicity know that we are actually applying for more government funding. That is, processes might be better, but there's hopefully, I think 43 million. Yeah, there's quite enough worth mentioning as part of it.
And through Madam Chair, we have put out a media statement when this opportunity came about earlier, and we'll be sure to follow that up. One thing that we are doing nationally as river managers is also making sure that there is that heightened awareness across the sector, given what we've seen over the last few months around the work that we're doing and the importance of the work that river managers do.
Here's hoping that we can put out another really great media statement once this comes to fruition. But just as an FYI to the councillors, Wendy, it might be good to circulate that previous media release just to councillors, so you can see what messaging has gone out in regards to this project. And like I say, fingers crossed that there's bigger fanfare to come on it. I've got Warren next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Greg, with the recent weather events, is there any ability to go back to government now and look at boosting up some of these figures, etc.? I know, talking to Emily up in Whitianga, she's sort of, we kicked a figure around of about 6 million. There's sort of 3 million here in the book at the moment. But yeah, just wonder where that sits. And it's something, I know the government's looking at a lot of hard infrastructure at the moment with what's been damaged, etc. But just some of the soft infrastructure and looking at these flooding and river catchments, etc. And pushing that angle.
Yeah, and thank you for your comment, Councillor. It's very relevant to the time that we're in at the moment. So I'll make a couple of observations. One is that I guess these are always put up, but they are subject to further confirmation once we get into the process of receiving the funding. In terms of working up specific funding agreements. So there will be the opportunity for us to consider prioritisation of work, particularly in those top 2 catchment areas, because there will have been needs that would have changed since this initial, I guess, proposal was worked up. And you rightly point out that, yes, there has been a very strong focus on hard infrastructure recovery. And that's certainly the, I guess, the flavour that we've seen come through where there's government support being made available. But we are being as active as we can in terms of highlighting that it is not just about the hard infrastructure, and particularly when it comes to our flood schemes. It is also about the damage that has been sustained to our catchments and the opportunity to remediate that in order to support a healthier and more sustainable catchment.
Thanks, Greg.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to support both Warren and, Councillor Mayor and Councillor Clarkson. That I think we do need to look at soft infrastructure a lot more. And as Emily pointed out, she could quite easily do with another $3 million up there in soft infrastructure in the Coromandel. And I imagine the Waipa and southern districts of the Waipa River would most probably be wanting the same. So soft infrastructure is most probably in the future something we've got to seriously look at. Thank you.
Great. All right. So do I have a mover to receive the report? Councillor Nicol, second, and Councillor Kneebone. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much for that. Greg, look forward to good news
Thank you, Madam Chair.
soon. All right. We've now got item 8.7. This is on page 263 of your agenda. This is the CoLab draft statement of intent for the year ended 30 June 2024 and the RSHL draft 2024 statement of intent. That's exciting. Are we all
Contain it.
excited about this? We're all excited. Okay. Janine.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So as the report sets out, council is a shareholder in two council-controlled organisations. So CoLab, or Waikato Local Authority Shared Services, and Regional Software Holdings Limited as well. Each year, each of those CCOs is required to issue a statement of intent, and that provides a way of communication regarding priorities and measures that the CCO will work towards in the coming year. The SOI is required to be adopted by the CCO by the 1st of May each year, but prior to that, council has the opportunity to provide feedback on the draft SOI. Normally, these documents would come through the Finance and Services Committee for consideration. However, due to the timing of the receipt of them, they're coming directly to you. So just an opportunity for feedback from councillors around the objectives that have been set that we can report back to the CCOs respectively.
For you,
Councillor
Mr.
Hughes.
Chair, question to Janine. Janine, it's probably a very simple explanation. Consultants, most of your expenses are consulting. Can you just explain what that is? It's a dirty word at the moment, of course.
Sorry, Councillor Hughes, in which?
In your financial management reports. I assume we're going there, are we, or not? 303, yeah, 30, further on to 298.
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. I think this reflects the current structure and resourcing model for the CCO at the moment. Councillors may be familiar with the discussion around the transition of RSHL from the entity that set up regulatory software for the regional sector into a broader regional shared services sector entity. That work will happen over the next 12 months in essence, which will, from my perspective as a brand new board member on that CCO, call into question the whole resourcing model, delivery model, which at the moment is coalitions of the willing in terms of council staff, supplemented by, as you point out, those external costs. So does the CCO itself actually need to resource up and be employing more people, or what is the right delivery model given its broader objectives?
Sorry, through you again, Mr. Chair. So are you saying that is a genuine overhead? There's no element of of IP investment or capital investment or intellectual property included in those numbers? Is that, it's a pure operating expense?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Nicol.
Thanks. Okay, so we're commenting on, so you're saying that these are the draft ones to give feedback on, but the final ones will come back to us? Is that what you were saying before, Janine?
This is the opportunity for council to have input into these draft SOIs.
Okay,
So this is the chance. You won't get, there's no further opportunity after this.
but so it's just the opportunity of input. There's no further sign off required from us to
Correct.
accept that statement of intent. Good to understand. Thanks. I think for just some thoughts I had, and I'm mindful that, you know, that's on face value of just this report, not a huge amount of involvement with either to date myself. I think it could be considered around how many independent directors there are for each. I just noted there was one independent chair, was it for RSHL? And I just thought getting those fresh eyes from outside local government really helpful. So just my feedback as something to consider.
So, so Madam Chair, if I could just respond to that, through the RSHL board composition has been recently reviewed as it has set up into a broader shared services entity. And that has expanded that independent membership from previously 1 to 2.
Oh, awesome. That's
Yep.
what I was kind of after. I didn't. And then the other part was, I noticed that in the appendix 4, and noting the recent change with Western Bay of Plenty District Council, it's currently listed as one of the Waikato local authorities. It's like Taupo was just taken out and Western Bay of Plenty put in, but they might want to just tidy that up to say that it is from outside this region. And I think for both, I would, since it's our chance to feedback, I think the focus on assisting the councils with their climate change work would be really helpful, since to me, that seems to be something that would be timing-wise of preference based on everyone learning together still at the moment on how to tackle complex issues like that, and including biodiversity, for example, because it's linked. Because I note there was something around a customer digital enablement program with CoLab, which was focusing on a broader topic of sustainability, but rubbish and recycling. I thought, well, that's something that I would put behind those other two topics of something to really help our councils get on top of engaging with the community with digitally. And those are really my main ones. I am interested in what CoLab's talking about with participatory democracy and how they might help the councils with that, if you want to comment on that at all. But yeah, I just couldn't quite get quite enough out of that statement of intent to understand. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Councillor Nicol, just if I could comment on
'cause you're
perhaps
on.
those matters, because I'm on the CoLab board, and there's actually a board meeting tomorrow, so it's quite timely. Any comments that get made? The Democracy Centre of Expertise, so I think that chief executives around the region and the councils recognise that some of them are quite poorly resourced, and with some of the signals through the Future for Local Government panels, you know, thinking a lot of the ideas that have been raised for increasing community participation, it was recognised that it would be useful to get a centralised skill set for how to go about this. With respect to the climate change comments, I don't think we've tasked CoLab, which are quite thin on the ground with their own people, to take a centralised approach. But what has happened through the Mayoral Forum, the Mayoral Forum is setting what its priorities are for the region. You know, if the Mayoral Forum sets that as priority, then that would get pushed down to chief executives, go find a way of getting some commonality or whatever it is that, you know, where that goes. And now whether CoLab would be the vehicle to be tasked with that or some other avenue.
Yeah,
It's
that's good to
probably
be
a-
aware of, thanks,
Yep.
because I notice in the climate space that can very much happen, and the smaller councils will be left behind on this topic we're trying to tackle together. And CoLab I see as one avenue to help with that.
Yes,
Yeah,
and
just
CoLab-
considering the history with the energy and management work that they've been doing.
And the efficiency savings for councils
Yeah.
that have been, yeah. And so I think that CoLab will respond to what councils ask them to do as opposed to generate their own work program and go out to councils. And just with respect to the customer digital enablement, there's probably a bigger fish to fry there. I think the district councils said we don't want to do everything all at once. We want to start with something small that we all have something in common
Oh,
with.
yeah.
Hence they started rubbish and recycling. Of
Right.
course, from our perspective, there's a much bigger fish to fry.
Yeah.
And so we're not part actively of that project unless it expands into a different space.
I understand. Thank you for that.
All right, Councillor Marr.
Yeah, Janine, in regard to RSHL, and excuse my ignorance, but is there a relationship between Iris and Reboot?
Through you, Madam Chair, no, there isn't.
No, there's-
So IRIS is a collaborative project across the regional sector, which is done through RSHL, whereas Reboot is our own.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, no more questions. Do I have a motion to, sorry, I'm looking for my.
Happy to move.
Councillor
Mahuta.
Thank you.
Sorry, happy to move.
Thank you for that, Pippa. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Downard. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much. All right, we're now moving on to 8.8. This is on page 309. We have the different.
No, got the setting it.
Right. It was like different people. Welcome, Lizette and Ed.
Good afternoon.
We're talking about the council representation for governance for the Thames-Coromandel District Council Shoreline Management Pathway implementation. This has been a change of spirit and heart. So good to see.
Exactly, thank you. So I'm here on behalf of Alejandro Cifuentes today. He's unwell and Ed's acting for Tracy, so that's why there's a surprising couple of faces here at the end of the table. But the paper's pretty straightforward. It requests that council appoints 2 representatives on that implementation phase of the coastal adaptation project that Thames-Coromandel District Council has been doing, which is called the Shoreline Management Pathways. They've adopted that shoreline management pathways in September last year, so now they're really looking for the next phase and really implementing what they have put together, and that is that framework for managing and reducing risks to people, property and the environment in taonga associated with coastal hazards. The details all in the report. Alejandro will assist appointees in getting up to speed and the agenda contents of any meetings. That's what we're here for. So without further ado, it's over to discussion.
Thank you. Councillor Nicol.
Thank you. Awesome to have that invite from TCDC for 2 councillors to attend. It's important work and take quite a bit of interest in it. I'd like to nominate the 2 constituency councillors for those roles, which would be Councillor Ma and Councillor Hodge. And
So
if they accept.
We've got a mover and a seconder. Are the 2 constituent councillors happy to accept those appointments?
I'm happy to accept, and yeah, no, it's great to see that relationship improving. So,
Yeah.
And thank you, Councillor Nicol and Councillor Kneebone.
All right, we've got a mover and a seconder. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
Kia ora.
Fantastic. All right, next we have 8.9. This is on page 313. This is the Future-Proof Public Transport Subcommittee appointment. So this is, we've got Mark here. So this is formalizing the future-proof committee adopted the terms of reference, went through a bit of a process to get agreement across all of the members, but we did. We had support. So this is just going through the motion of putting the right people on the, or putting people onto those, onto that subcommittee. Mark, did you want to say anything, or are we?
Perhaps, perhaps the only thing I'll say is through you, Madam Chair, I think this is a really great initiative by the council. What it is it's gifting a small amount of the control that this council has over public transport services in the region as the region's public transport authority. There can only be one, and that's us. But it's gifting a little bit of that into a collective enterprise that we will rely on to ensure that we have far greater coordination between services and infrastructure, which is absolutely what this council has already acknowledged is required for public transport to be successful. So I think this is a great initiative led by this council and a great outcome, and it's excellent to see our future-proof partners equally support it.
Right. We do, we've got Angela and myself we previously discussed that as a council. We do have the option for an alternate. Councillor Nicol has expressed an interest in that alternate position. Are we all good with that? Angela, did you want to speak as the deputy chair of this? once
No, I
we
was
go
just
through this
going to
process?
suggest Councillor Nicol as well. But
Do you want to move that? I'm happy
yeah,
to
I'm happy to
second
move
that.
that. Thank you.
All those in favor?
I was
Oh,
just
sorry.
gonna- Sorry, I had a question to understand. So we've got future proof, understand all that. We've got this public transport committee, which we,
Subcommittee that sits under.
subcommittee, which I think we
Okay.
all endorsed. So you're there, and I think Angela's already
Angela's the
is
deputy.
there, is the deputy. And can I just ask why Angela wouldn't be, because I know she's got a passion for public transport, why she wouldn't be, so on that
Why she
committee?
wouldn't be.
So how does it actually work in practice? So, yes, but you've got two members on the,
I'm not chairing this.
No,
It
no.
has an independent chair,
yeah, so we've got two members on this committee or one member on the committee?
2 members.
And so this
Member
alternate
5.
would be for either of you?
Yes.
Okay, now it's not confusing.
Okay. Good stuff. All right. So we've got a mover and a seconder. All those in
Cool. Okay.
favor?
I
Opposed? Carried. All right.
Could I just?
Yeah.
Actually mentioned in the motion.
Somebody else like to
I'm happy
second
to.
this? Well, no, you can't do it, Jennifer, because you would be mentioned in it as well. Councillor Clarkson, all right.
Uh,
All right. Do I need to put it again if we change the seconder? Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
the previous, it just occurred to me that with the previous item, with the Thames-Coromandel Shoreline Management Plan stuff, we don't have an alternate for that. If the council was happy to, I'd be really keen to be the alternate if either Warren or Kata can't go to do those governance duties. Just
That
from the
will have to
climate.
go back to that.
I
committee.
don't know what the tours are for that
No
and whether or
worries.
not we're allowed to have an alternate, but I'm sure that it can be
Yeah, just raise
raised.
it. Thanks. I'm just mindful that it can happen.
All right. So now we need to move into public excluded. We've got a mover and Councillor Hodge, second and Councillor Hughes. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried? Yeah, oh, once, sorry. Okay, so we're just gonna give you a second.